I was at a startup mixer last week, watching this founder pitch an idea that was, objectively speaking, a complete disaster. The logistics were impossible, the market didn't exist, and the math simply didn't add up. But the room was absolutely mesmerized. He wasn't sweating, his voice didn't waver, and he held perfect eye contact. He spoke with this terrifying, absolute conviction.
It wasn't just a sales pitch.
No, it wasn't the slickness of a con man. It was the genuine fervor of a prophet. He didn't just want us to believe him. He clearly believed himself, down to his very core.
And that makes all the difference.
It does. Because he had zero physiological tells of a liar. No shifting eyes, no hesitation investors were actually pulling out their checkbooks for a venture that was doomed to fail.
Wow.
That I looked over at a brilliant engineer I know standing in the corner. This is a guy who sees the world with perfect mathematical clarity. He can spot a flaw in a system from a mile away.
And he was.
He looked miserable. He was paralyzed, too aware of the risks to move, too grounded in reality to take a leap. That contrast hit me hard. We like to think we value truth, but in that room, the delusional founder was the apex predator and the realistic engineer was invisible.
Yeah.
It made me realize that the founder's blindness to reality wasn't a bug in his operating system. It was a high-level feature. He had successfully hacked his own brain to bypass our lie detectors.
And that leads to a really disturbing question.
It raises a disturbing question. What if evolution doesn't actually want us to see the truth? What if our survival depends entirely on how well we can lie to ourselves?
Okay, so let's get into that. Because this idea, it really does. It kind of rattles your whole understanding of consciousness, doesn't it?
It really does. For this deep dive, we are tackling this exact thesis, the adaptive advantage of delusion, the theory that our cognitive biases are overconfidence, even our whole perception of reality.
That they aren't flaws.
Exactly. They're not bugs to be corrected, but sophisticated evolutionary features designed for survival, for social influence, for winning.
And the sources we're drawing on here, they span everything from, evolutionary game theory to social psychology and some really hard experimental data. It forces you to question this basic assumption that natural selection actually favors accuracy.
That's the thing. The conventional wisdom is that your brain should build the most accurate, realistic picture of the world possible. That's how you survive, right?
But that's being called a naive view now by a lot of leading researchers. We're moving way past the idea that overconfidence just feels good or, helps with anxiety.
Right.
We're now looking at it as a strategic weapon, something designed specifically to win social contests, to boost your perceived competence, both in ancient environments and, in a startup mixer today.
That brings us straight to the core engine driving our founder at the mixer. The concept that you have to lie to yourself.
To effectively lie to others. Yeah.
It's an idea that goes back decades to the evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers. And he framed overconfidence not as some personal quirk, but as a critical adaptive tool.
Right. His hypothesis was that self-deception isn't just for the feel-good benefits, like feeling better about yourself or cutting down on anxiety. It's a dedicated high-level strategy.
A strategy for what?
To more effectively persuade or deceive other people. The selection pressure for this is just immense. If you think about it, in any social or competitive situation, there's some degree of deception.
Of course.
So that means there has to be this incredible pressure on the other side, on the recipients, to get really good at spotting that deception. We all have these built-in lie detectors.
And when you're consciously lying, you know you're lying. There's this conflict in your head between what you're saying and what you know is true.
And that conflict leaks out. That's what generates the famous tells, physiological cues, the shifting eyes, the hesitation, the micro expressions. Even your heart rate can give you away.
So the evolutionary hack is just breathtakingly simple. You just eliminate the source of the conflict.
Get rid of the internal battle.
If you can actually convince yourself that the lie is true, if you self-deceive, then all those unconscious cues just vanish.
You're no longer managing two versions of reality. And that makes your story, your pitch, practically impenetrable.
So Trivers' original idea, it lays out a few key advantages for this, right?
It does. He basically proposed 3 major adaptive advantages that make self-deception this incredibly powerful and persistent cognitive technology.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, and maybe the most obvious, it just eliminates the cognitive load. Lying is mentally taxing. It takes up a ton of resources to keep your story straight.
But believing your own hype.
Incredibly efficient. Second, it's a great defense mechanism. If your deception is eventually exposed, you can genuinely claim you were just mistaken. Not that you were malicious, you believed it too.
That's plausible deniability baked right into your own psychology.
Exactly. And third, and this is the most critical part for the social game, it lets you display way more confidence and competence than is actually warranted.
And that gives you a huge advantage in competition for status, for resources, for investor money.
Or for mates. It's all the same game.
It's like the brain runs this incredibly sophisticated internal PR department.
That's a great way to put it.
It keeps the raw, unflattering data, all the flaws and the doubts locked away in some unconscious part of the system.
But it pushes this much more positive, compelling, persuasive narrative out into the conscious mind, purely for broadcasting to others.
An internal firewall.
Designed to bypass everyone else's lie detectors and maybe even our own internal doubt. And look, this isn't just a theory anymore. Researchers recently took this idea and put it to a really rigorous, high-stakes test.
They moved it from hypothesis to the lab.
A huge economic experiment. It was actually 2 studies combined, with close to 700 participants. And it was designed specifically to test the strategic self-deception idea in a formal, highly incentivized way. They wanted to see if the motor to persuade could actually cause the distortion of self-belief.
And that distinction is everything, isn't it?
Okay.
The difference between correlation and causation.
It's vital.
Because it's one thing to say successful people are also confident. That's just a correlation.
Right. They might be confident because they're successful.
But to prove that the desire to influence others actually makes you more confident, well, that's showing the adaptive technology in action. So how do they set it up? How do you isolate that one variable?
The methodology was really clever. They started by having everyone take a pretty challenging intelligence test. That was important because it created genuine uncertainty. Nobody was totally sure how well they did compared to others.
Okay, so everyone's a bit unsure of their actual performance.
Exactly. Then, right after the test, they split the participants into 2 groups, a control group and a contestant group.
Contestants.
The contestants were told the truth, that later on, they could earn a cash prize, €15, if they could convince employers in a face-to-face meeting that they were a top performer.
And the control group.
They got no information about that persuasion opportunity. So the only difference between the 2 groups was the anticipation of needing to sell themselves.
The potential for profitable deception.
Yeah.
That was the variable.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Then came the really crucial part. They had to get a measure of everyone's private confidence, their true internal belief about how well they did.
Which is hard. People will just say they're confident to sound good or to guess what you want to hear.
Right. And that's where this specialized tool comes in. We should probably slow down and unpack this because it's key. They used something called the Becker-de Groot-Marshak mechanism, or BDM.
Okay, BDM. Why was that specific procedure so important? What does it do?
Well, the BDM is a sophisticated economic trick, essentially. It forces you to reveal your true subjective probability of something happening. In this case, your actual belief about your chances of being a top performer.
How does it force you?
It makes you bet your own money. Your stated confidence level is pitted against a randomized chance. The math just works out so that the best possible strategy for you to maximize your potential earnings is to report your genuinely held internal belief.
So it's not a performance. It's not what you want others to hear.
It nails down what you actually believe inside your own head.
Okay, so they've got this accurate measure of genuine belief, and they've created the motive for persuasion in one group, but not the other. So what was the finding?
The central finding was a huge confirmation of the theory. The contestant group, the ones who were anticipating the need to persuade, reported privately held confidence beliefs that were statistically significantly higher than the control group.
How much higher?
The average belief among the contestants was 62.0%, compared to 57.8% for the control group. That's a 4.2 percentage point difference.
And that 4.2%. That's it. That's the measurable impact of strategic self-deception.
It's the quantifiable proof that the desire to persuade actively causes the distortion of your own beliefs.
It completely reframes overconfidence. It's not a coping mechanism. It's a cognitive technology.
It's a tool. It takes your internal world and immediately biases it to create a more convincing external projection. It makes you a better actor, a better salesperson, a better founder.
But hold on. If they've just pumped up their own confidence, does that actually work? I mean, does this self-generated belief translate into actual measurable success? The founder might believe he's a genius, but does the investor actually buy it?
Fantastic question, and that brings us to the second phase of the experiment, which was designed to isolate the causal effect of confidence on persuasiveness. They had to rule out other things, like actual performance or just someone being naturally charismatic.
Yeah, that seems like the hardest part. How do you randomly manipulate how confident a person feels, separate from their actual skill, so you can measure the pure effect of just the belief itself?
They used a masterful little trick, intentionally noisy feedback. So before the contestants met the employers, they all got a signal about their relative performance.
A signal?
They were told the computer drew a ball from one of two virtual urns. If you were a top performer, the urn had 15 black balls, good news, and 5 red ones. If you were not a top performer, it was the opposite. 15 red balls, 5 black.
Okay, so the signal is generally informative. It points you in the right direction about 3/4 of the time.
75% accuracy. But, and this is the genius of it was noisy. Some top performers randomly got a bad signal, a red ball, and some low performers randomly got a good signal, a black ball.
Ah, I see. And that random noise is the key to proving causality.
Exactly. It creates what they call exogenous variation, a random push up or down in their confidence level after they get the feedback. This random bump in confidence is now totally uncorrelated with their actual score or their personality.
It's the closest you can get to reaching into someone's brain and just randomly turning the confidence dial up or down.
You've got it. So now they have this pool of contestants whose confidence levels are varying randomly, even among people with similar actual scores. Then they bring in the employers,
Who are also incentivized with real money.
to correctly spot the true high performers. Yes. So the contestants go in for these face-to-face interviews, but they're restricted. They can only say one sentence out loud.
What was the sentence?
I believe that my performance was in the top 2 of my group with X% probability, and that X was the confidence score they reported using that BDM mechanism.
And the big reveal. Did the payoff for self-deception show up?
It did, loud and clear. That random increase in private confidence, driven purely by the noisy feedback, directly and positively correlated with higher evaluations from the employers.
So the more confident they were, the more the employers believed them.
And they used a robust statistical method to isolate the causal impact. They found that for every 1 percentage point increase in a contestant's internal belief, it led to a 0.32 percentage point increase in the evaluation they got from the employer.
Wow. A 0.32% measurable payoff for every single percentage point of self-generated belief. That means belief literally generates monetary value and social standing.
And here's the detail that really ties it all back to Triver's original idea. The employers weren't just reacting to the number the person said. The effect worked through both verbal and nonverbal channels, pretty much equal.
So it wasn't just about saying, I'm 90% confident.
No. The genuinely held internal confidence, that conviction they had successfully implanted in themselves, it subtly leaked out in ways the observers picked up on, beyond just that single percentage. The contestant who truly believed they were better they just came across as more competent.
Which makes perfect sense. If you're managing that internal conflict between the truth and the lie, your body betrays you. But if you genuinely believe the fiction,
you transmit that conviction flawlessly. It really validates that old Mark Twain idea. When a person cannot deceive himself, the chances are against his being able to deceive other people.
So the implication for modern life is pretty stark. We should expect overconfidence to be absolutely rampant and highly adaptive in any profession where persuasion is key.
And where true ability is hard to assess quickly, where it's noisy.
Like law, high-stakes finance, politics.
And especially entrepreneurship. That founder you saw, filled with that terrifying absolute conviction. He possesses the superior adaptive technology for that particular social and economic game.
Which puts the realistic engineer in a terrible spot. His superior competence is constantly being overshadowed by the founder's superior fiction.
In that competitive environment, yes. If the ability to project confidence is more valuable for getting resources like investor money than the ability to accurately assess risk, then the ecosystem will select for the founder.
The engineer's clarity is actually a disadvantage in that early stage.
His ability to deceive himself in that context is simply a resource acquisition strategy that has proven highly efficient over evolutionary time.
Okay, so we've established that evolution favors self-deception and social competition. But let's shift focus. Let's move from winning a status contest to just, surviving an ambiguous threat in the world. If the brain is built to project these fictions, What happens when it has to assess a real risk? Does it suddenly switch over and become a truth-seeking machine?
Not at all. And this is where we need to bring in a second major concept. Error management theory, or EMT.
Error management theory.
EMT's core argument is that the brain is not designed to seek literal truth or perfect rationality. It's a system designed to maximize fitness by reducing the overall cost of its cognitive errors.
Even if that means making more errors in total.
Even if it requires increasing the total number of errors. This is the whole idea of an adaptive bias. The goal isn't accuracy, it's maximizing your fitness by avoiding the most catastrophic outcomes.
To get our heads around that, we need to clearly define the kinds of errors we're talking about when we're making decisions under uncertainty.
Right. So when you have to quickly assess an ambiguous situation, is that a threat or not? There are two basic types of mistakes you can make. The first is a false positive or a type I error.
A false positive.
This is when you decide a risk exists when it actually doesn't. The classic example is you're walking in the woods and you mistake a harmless coiled stick for a dangerous snake. You perceive a threat that isn't real.
And the second type of error
is the false negative, a type 2 error. That's when you fail to notice a risk that actually exists. So you fail to see the real snake that's right there in front of you.
Okay, stick or snake, false positive, false negative.
And EMT focuses entirely on the asymmetric costs of these two errors. It shows how this massive difference in cost shapes our entire cognitive system toward systematic biases.
And for evolution to embed a permanent bias, that cost difference must be huge. Let's use the snake example to really illustrate that asymmetry in a survival context.
Okay, look at the costs. What's the cost of a false positive? Mistaking the stick for a snake.
It's pretty low. A jump, a shot of adrenaline, maybe you feel a bit silly for a second, you lose a minute of foraging time.
Exactly, it's trivial. Now, what's the cost of a false negative? Failing to see the actual snake that's about to strike.
Catastrophic. It could be severe injury, incapacitation, or death.
Death versus a brief scare. The cost asymmetry is enormous. The false negative is exponentially more expensive.
So evolution is going to favor whatever system avoids that catastrophic error.
Precisely. The system gets biased to minimize the costlier error, which is the false negative. And to do that, our cognition systematically biases us toward false positives.
We're built to err on the side of caution. We constantly overestimate danger from ambiguous threats.
Because that bias ensures that a very costly situation, like a deadly threat, will be recognized almost every time, even if it means we have a lot of low-cost false alarms.
It's the ultimate downside protection strategy. The brain isn't an objective recorder, it's a chief risk officer.
And we see this exact principle in modern engineering. It's a great analogy. Just think about the smoke detector in your house.
Right. It goes off every time I burn toast.
It is intentionally designed with a massive false positive bias. You get these frequent, low-cost false alarms from steam or burnt toast. But that design choice ensures you avoid the catastrophic, high-cost false negative of missing a real fire.
The annoyance is acceptable because the catastrophe is prevented.
So when we encounter some new technology or an unfamiliar person or hear a weird sound in the dark, our immediate, often irrational assumption of danger isn't a failure of rationality.
It's the optimal adaptive response to an ancient risk management problem.
Exactly. And this principle, it goes way beyond just physical threats. EMT applies the same logic to really complex social judgments, especially courtship, and it shows how this cost asymmetry shapes very specific, often gender-related biases.
And this is where it really hits home, because it explains so many of our modern frustrations. If you apply this to reproductive fitness, the costs of type I and type 2 errors shift dramatically depending on the biological investment in offspring.
Let's start with men. EMT predicts, and the research confirms, what's called a men's sexual overperception bias, meaning men are systematically biased toward false positives. They tend to overperceive sexual interest where none actually exists.
And why would that be adaptive?
Because ancestrally, the cost of a false negative missing a potential reproductive opportunity was incredibly high. It meant a total loss of that potential fitness payoff.
What is the cost of a false positive?
A misinterpretation leading to rejection or embarrassment was comparatively minor. Annoying, but you recover quickly.
So the system biases men to minimize that costly error of omission, of missing out, even if it means a much higher volume of overall mistakes and social misreadings today.
Exactly. And for women, the prediction and the evidence point to the opposite bias, which is all about protecting against a totally different kind of catastrophic cost.
Different risk to manage.
Right. Women tend to exhibit a commitment skepticism bias. They lean toward false negatives, underperceiving or being skeptical of a man's stated commitment.
And the evolutionary logic there.
The ancestral cost of a false positive for women was catastrophic. Committing time and resources to an uncommitted partner and risking the abandonment of vulnerable offspring. That was a huge fitness cost. Offspring survival was directly tied to the partner's commitment and provisioning.
So the risk of an uncommitted father was the high-cost error that selection had to eliminate.
And so the cognitive system is driven to protect against that. It biases women toward skepticism, toward maybe failing to detect true commitment, even if it means missing some genuine opportunities in the short term. It's a risk mitigation strategy.
It's pretty striking that these biases, which cause so much confusion and friction in, say, the modern dating world, are just remnants of these ancient, highly efficient risk management systems.
It's all about cost, not truth. And this prioritization of cost over accuracy, it even extends to how we choose to gather information in the first place. This is called the costly information hypothesis.
Costly information.
It explores the trade-off between getting highly accurate information through individual learning and getting information that is just quick and cheap, which is social learning.
So this is the difference between doing years of your own independent research, the engineer's path,
versus just watching what the loudest, most successful people are doing and copying them, the founder's path.
Right.
Individual learning, trial and error, gives you high quality information, but it's slow, it's time consuming, it's cognitively demanding, and it can be personally very risky.
And social learning.
Adopting beliefs from the crowd is fast, it's low cost, it's low risk, but the information is inherently less accurate, and you're susceptible to all the biases that are already in the group.
So when does evolution decide that the fast, cheap, inaccurate option is better than the slow, costly, accurate one?
Whenever the cost, time, or risk of individual learning gets too high, when that happens, evolution will heavily favor mechanisms that are biased toward social learning. We prefer the quick, safe consensus from the crowd over the long, risky, independent search for objective truth.
Because speed and safety, historically, boosted fitness more consistently than pure accuracy.
And you see this everywhere today. Think about boom and bust cycles, cryptocurrency, speculative stock bubbles. The individual learner, the careful analyst like our engineer, might see the fundamental flaw.
But they're too slow.
They're paralyzed by the need for perfect, veridical data. Meanwhile, the successful founder or the speculator is operating on this high-confidence, simplified information, the social signal that says, everyone else is buying.
That's herd behavior. And it happens because the cost of doing your own deep fundamental analysis on every single crypto coin is astronomically high.
But the cost of just joining the herd and copying their strategy is low. Even if the herd is wrong, being wrong with the majority often carries a lower social and economic penalty than being right all by yourself and missing the boat.
It's an adaptive shortcut. We are selected to be followers when the cost of independent investigation is too high.
And the engineer, agonizing over his perfect internal model of reality, loses to the founder, who just optimized for the social signal that says, act now, be confident, and copy success. EMT shows that we are optimized for efficiency and survival, not for intellectual purity.
Okay, so if evolution rewards self-deception in social contests and it manages risk by favoring these cheap, error-prone shortcuts, this all seems to be building to the most radical idea of this whole deep dive.
It is.
That our entire experience of reality, we call perception, is fundamentally an adaptive survival interface, not a mirror of the objective world. This is the interface theory of perception, or ITP.
And ITP directly attacks what has been the long-standing intuitive assumption in philosophy and science. We can call it the reconstruction thesis.
The reconstruction thesis.
Right. It's the idea that the main goal of perception is to estimate or reconstruct the objective world accurately, to give us a picture that is, at least roughly true to what's actually out there.
Which seems so obvious. I mean, why would we have eyes and ears if not to gather accurate information? If my perception of a cliff face wasn't accurate, I'd fall off it.
And that is the conventional evolutionary argument. Vision is useful only if it is reasonably accurate. But the proponents of ITP argue this is a fundamental conceptual error.
An error? How?
Because natural selection optimizes for only one thing: fitness, survival, and reproduction. It does not optimize for veridicality, for truth and accuracy. The two are distinct, and often chasing perfect veridicality is costly, slow, and therefore bad for your fitness.
So selection isn't choosing the organism with the most accurate worldview. It's choosing the one that survives and reproduces most effectively.
Precisely. The ITP is part of the construction thesis. Perception does not reconstruct reality. It constructs a species-specific perceptual world based purely on adaptive utility. If objective reality, the true structure of space, time, matter, is this overwhelmingly complex thing made of quantum fields and mathematical equations,
then a perfect reconstruction would be paralyzing. It would be like having the engineer's depth of knowledge about the market, but for every single second of your life. You'd never move.
You'd never move. A simple, quick-to-render map that's tailored for your immediate survival needs is far more adaptively useful than a perfect, paralyzing reconstruction of objective reality.
And this is where the interface analogy really helps make sense of this.
It's the perfect mental model. Think about your computer's desktop. It's a user interface. You see a small yellow icon shaped like a folder. That perception is incredibly useful. You can drag it, click it, open it.
Right.
But the color and shape of that yellow icon do not literally resemble the underlying reality of the file, do they?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The reality is what? Magnetic fields, electrical impulses, transistors, binary code on a hard drive. It's nothing like a yellow folder.
And the icon is useful precisely because it hides that overwhelming complexity. You don't need to be a computer engineer to use your computer. You just need to understand the interface.
So applying that to us, our perception of space, time, a rock, a tree, these are just the biological desktop icons.
They are properties and categories of our interface, shaped by selection to hide the objective complexity of reality and just guide adaptive behaviors in our specific niche. Resemblance to the objective world is irrelevant. Utility is everything.
It's a pragmatic operating system designed for action, not contemplation.
And to really drive this home, that our perceptions are just functional fictions, we can look at cases where the interface fails, where an organism's simplified interface gets exploited by the world.
And this brings us to that famous case of the Australian jewel beetle.
Julidomorpha bakewelli. The male beetles are driven by a pretty simple adaptive rule to find females. They look for shiny, dimpled, yellow-brown wing cases.
Simple rules for a simple niche.
But unfortunately for them, modern Western Australia is littered with discarded beer bottles, or stubbies. These bottles are shiny, dimpled, the right shade of brown, but they are also abnormally large compared to a real female.
And that size difference turns the beer bottle into what's the term?
A supernormal stimulus. The bottle engages the male beetle's desirable female category much more intensely, more forcefully than any real female ever could.
And the tragic result is that the males just swarm the bottles, trying to mate with glass, sometimes to the point of extinction.
And that failure is the proof. The beetle's category for female is clearly not a statistical estimate of a true female's properties. It's what's called a satisficing solution. A quick, simple rule like bigger is better that worked well enough in its original beer bottle-free niche.
The stubby reveals that the perception isn't about objective truth. It's about a simplified heuristic that can be exploited because it isn't accurate.
Right.
Okay, but this raises the classic challenge to ITP, and we have to address it. If a tiger or a cliff edge or a car speeding towards me is just an icon on my interface, why shouldn't I go and pet the tiger? When it attacks me, won't I discover the objective reality that ITP says is hidden?
That question perfectly captures the confusion between taking the interface seriously and taking it literally.
Okay, explain that difference.
Evolution absolutely ensures we take our tiger icon seriously. Our ancestors who didn't take the tiger icon seriously, who failed to activate the runaway icon, came to a very swift and early end.
So our actions on the icon running away from the tiger icon, avoiding the cliff icon, have real repercussions.
They have direct repercussions in the objective world, whatever the world may be. The interface is adaptive, but, and this is the crucial point, taking the icon seriously does not mean you have to take it literally. You have to react to the icon, but that doesn't mean you have to believe that the icon itself, the perceived tiger, is an accurate depiction of the fundamental structure of reality, of the quantum forces or mathematical equations that truly govern the objective world. The tiger icon is just the instruction manual for appropriate behavior.
And to move from analogy to something more like mathematical proof, they modeled this, right? They ran simulations.
Yes, they conducted interface games, pitting two different perceptual strategies against each other based purely on fitness payoffs in a competitive environment.
What was the setup?
They had simulated animals competing over territories that contained resources like food and water. And they compared two very different ways of perceiving this niche.
Strategy one was the truth strategy, the engineer's approach.
Yes, the truth interface strategy. It perceived the exact veridical values of food and water for every territory. It was highly accurate, getting around 40 bits of complex information per decision. But this came at a high cognitive cost, high time, high energy.
And strategy two was the founder's approach. Simple, high confidence, low cost.
The simple interface strategy, it was non-vertical and it used extreme compression. It only perceived one bit of information per territory. For instance, it might just see a territory as green if the food value was above 50 or red if it was lower.
Incredibly fast and low cost.
Just a few bits of information to categorize the entire environment.
Now, in a conventional model, you'd think the accurate strategy would win out eventually, right? It has better information.
You would think so, but the simulation outcome was just unambiguous and radical. The simple, non-vertical strategy drove the truth-seeking strategy to swift extinction for most of the conditions they tested. Even when the cost per bit of information was tiny, the slight efficiency gain of the simple interface meant it could react faster, spend less energy, and just outcompete the truth-seekers every time.
Wow. So truth isn't just optional. It's an evolutionarily unstable strategy.
The pressure of competition ensures that speed, low cost, and adaptive utility are prioritized over accuracy. The game simulation showed statistically that natural selection actively selects against truthful perception.
So our conscious reality is just a finely tuned, resource-efficient survival tool, the ultimate useful fiction.
It fundamentally reverses our understanding of what it means to be conscious. We are, by design, machines optimized for winning the survival game and the social game, not for seeing the light.
So when we pull all of this together, the implications for how we see ourselves are profound. We've seen that evolution favors self-deception as a strategic weapon, designed to bypass our own lie detectors.
We've seen that our risk assessment is governed not by accuracy, but by minimizing the costliest errors, which leads to these deep systematic biases.
And finally, we realize our entire subjective reality, space, time, objects is just a survival interface designed to guide our behavior while hiding an overwhelmingly complex objective reality.
Evolution doesn't care about the true structure of the universe or the complex math of a business plan. It just cares about propagation and persistence.
The founder at the beginning, fueled by that genuine self-created conviction, the overconfidence that the experiments validated, he had the superior adaptive technology compared to the paralyzed engineer who was burdened by seeing things too clearly.
The engineer might know the truth, but the founder is optimized to get the resources needed to persist and to win the social game. The ability to create and commit to a sophisticated fiction about ourselves or the world gives us a measurable strategic advantage in a competitive and uncertain world. We're optimized to be efficient actors, not accurate observers.
So if we accept this interface theory, then our most powerful asset in this deeply complex and uncertain world isn't necessarily our ability to calculate risk perfectly, but the sophisticated fiction we tell ourselves that allows us to act decisively, project confidence, and simply survive.